So look, if you're a young guy, it's like straighten yourself up, don't be eating, Cheetos in the basement, covering yourself with orange dust and being bitter about women. It's like go out there and make yourself useful in some dimension or rather, and fortify yourself a bit and have some confidence, and then figure out how to present yourself in a manner commensurate with that, and get out there in the world so people can see you now and then, and some poor woman will be desperate enough to give you a shot at some point.
One of the biggest appeals of Jordan Peterson is his charismatic self-assuredness. He comes across as someone who knows what the hell he's talking about all the time. He makes bold claims with grand gestures that simply captivates his audience, and because he's achieved celebrity status, so very little of what he says to his audience is challenged. But there have been occasions where Peterson has been flat out wrong and was called out by people who were not as starstruck by him. So in this video, I'm going to highlight an example of Jordan Peterson being confidently flat out wrong. Some years ago, Peterson made the claim that ancient civilizations had knowledge about the double helix structure of DNA, and his evidence for that was his observance of the ubiquity of entwined stick-like figures which resemble the double helix structure of DNA across many ancient civilizations.
So you see the primary mother and father of humanity emerging from this underlying snake-like entity with its tails tangled together. I think that's I really do believe this, although it's very complicated to explain why. I really believe that's a representation of DNA. So, and that representation, that entwined double helix, that is everywhere. You can see it in Australian Aboriginal art, and I'm using the Australians as an example because they were isolated in Australia for like 50,000 years. They're the most archaic people that were ever discovered. And they have clear representations of these double helix structures in their art. So, and those are the two giant serpents out of which the world is made, roughly speaking. It's the same thing, you see that in the staff of Asclepius, which is the healing symbol that physicians use, although usually that's only one snake, but sometimes it's two. So that's a Chinese representation. And then there's this. That's the Egyptian representation.
It's so wild that Peterson, a supposed social scientist, would believe something as insane as that. What could possibly be an explanation for such representations? It isn't uncommon that ancient civilizations or even people today would have observed intertwined snakes and, for whatever reasons, make a drawing of them. None of these ancient civilizations make such associations between the figures of entwined snakes and DNA as Peterson is making. Where did he get such an idea from? If Peterson is right, then ancient civilizations would have had to have access to knowledge and possibly science that have been lost. We can easily see how this sits comfortably in the realm of fiction or delusion. Jordan Peterson is acting like he has discovered something profound. Shocking to realize that ancient people were aware of snakes and drew representations of them. I think the field of evolutionary psychology should be given as much credence as a gender studies degree. There is nothing scientific there, only the illusions of sometimes deranged minds like Peterson's. When Peterson made this ridiculous claim, he had the advantage of giving a lecture where no one challenged his ideas, but that did not save him from scathing criticism later. Richard Dawkins, one of the most insufferable public intellectuals I've had the displeasure of listening to, ironically was one of those who called out Peterson on this ridiculous idea.
You once showed in a lecture a picture of snakes spiraling around each other, snakes' tails.
Yes.
And you said something like, I think it's positively, that is a representation of DNA.
I think that's I really do believe this, although it's very complicated to explain why.
It's very complicated to explain why. The standard Peterson caveat: if it's too complicated for a public intellectual as brilliant as Jordan Peterson to explain to the plebes, then he might as well not say anything about it. Does he want people to simply take his word for it without proper understanding of what he's trying to communicate? This is standard Peterson trickery. He makes a bold claim. When he's challenged to explain it, he subtly interjects that it's a complicated matter and tries to move away as quickly as possible from that point. He tries that here, but Dawkins is having none of that and asks him to explain his position.
I really believe that's a representation of DNA. Yes, let's leave that one, but I promise I will return to that.
Well, let's run out of time, because that seems to me to go to the heart of what may be a difference between us, this aesthetic. I mean, that idea that in some sense represents DNA seems to me to be complete nonsense.
Peterson definitely introduced another point into the conversation, which is a claim by one of the people who discovered DNA, saying DNA had to have come from outer space because it was too complicated to have evolved.
Well, like I said, this is in the realm of wild speculation, but I know what Crick thought about to the origin of DNA. Well, he thought it was too complex to have evolved.
I see what you mean. You mean the idea of it coming from elsewhere.
Now,
From outer space.
I know that's an infinite regress problem.
That's what was...
Okay, so that was all that was behind that, bit of speculation, which I normally wouldn't have ever done.
That's an entirely new point that is not at all relevant to his first claim that the ancients knew about DNA, as evidenced by their drawing of snakes. Just as quickly, Peterson introduces another dimension to the conversation, this time talking about psychedelics.
I think that under some conditions, vision can expand to the point where they can see down into the micro level. They can apprehend the micro level consciously.
You think that our consciousness can extend down to the micro level, to the level of...
I do.
The micro level of DNA.
Well, since we're on this topic, I have taken extremely high doses of psilocybin. Like 4 doses is enough basically to knock you out of your body. I wouldn't recommend it casually. I took 7 grams 3 times, and I had this shamanic experience. It was unbelievable, and I don't even know I have no idea how to make sense out of it.
Well, I believe that. I can quite understand you have a most extraordinary experience. I've never taken such a drug, but I could imagine you had a most remarkable experience. But you've just said that you think that your consciousness can see into your cells and see the structure of DNA. That has got to be utter nonsense. I'm sorry.
Well, like I said, I'm perfectly willing to admit forthrightly that is a highly speculative idea. I guess I would only say in defense of that idea is that it is the case that consciousness can travel up and down levels of analysis in a real sense. And it isn't absolutely inconceivable that that's not an expandable capacity under some circumstances. In this visionary experience, I could feel my consciousness go down these levels of analysis, and I could see things that they appeared to me in my field of imagination, and I looked at them and I thought, that looks a lot like DNA.
But you're an educated man who already knows about DNA.
Yes. These people didn't know it was DNA.
Didn't know about it. That's what's so...
Oh no, they didn't know.
It doesn't surprise me in the least that you could have a visionary experience and think you see your DNA in your own cells. That, of course, is highly plausible. What is not
because I already know about it.
Yes. What is not plausible is that somebody who does not know about it, an ancient Chinese sculptor, whatever it was, who working long before Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA,
could possibly apprehend
that. That just isn't
fair enough.
What is the probability that Peterson is always high when he's making these ridiculous claims? It is not a mystery that certain drugs have hallucinogenic properties. So why does Peterson think that drug-induced delusions bear any deep meaning or have anything to do with reality? Dawkins brings him back to his previous point, characterizing his statement as utter nonsense. And Dawkins is absolutely right. Peterson's prior knowledge of DNA may have heavily influenced his psychedelic experience, such that what he saw is most likely him being more aware of his subconscious than him getting some sort of new insight into the nature of DNA. There is a word for the strategy of Peterson, and it's called gish gallop, where he tries to overwhelm his opponent with so many points at the same time that it's impossible to respond to all of them effectively. The way to deal with this is to hold Peterson's feet to the fire by refusing to move on from that initial point until he clarifies it. Peterson makes a series of loosely connected points that may be independently true and tries to build an association between them, which then tricks your brain into thinking that what he's saying is correct. There is no bearing to DNA coming from outer space or the effects of psychedelics on the initial point he made about ancient civilizations knowing about the nature of DNA and representing that knowledge with figures of entwined snakes. This man is a magician masquerading as an intellectual.
Up yours, woke moralists.
Now, if you're looking for something fun and exciting to read, check out my crime fiction novel, which features a debate on race and colonialism. Grab a copy and enjoy the read. The link is in the description of the video. So that's the video. If you like what we do on this channel, consider becoming a channel member or patron. However, your likes, shares, and views are just as valued.